It's now my pleasure to introduce two of this year's MBA students to share their reflections on these perspectives, on these talks. Barati, Mahloele, and Ellie Brown. Welcome.
So good morning. As Kate mentioned, some of you might know me, some of you might not. My name is Barati Mahloele. And I'm not standing here claiming to be an expert. I'm not standing here and the examples I'm going to use am I in any way insinuating are perfect, nor am I paid or endorsing any particular company. So if I happen to mention a company, trust me, they're no longer paying me. The purpose and why I'm here is to share my journey and what I went through and how my role as a finance person evolved over a number of years. And also just to give you some insight about how I believe, to some extent, the economics of mutuality are actually being practiced at some companies. So let me take you down a journey. Indulge me. I come from South Africa. And coming out of university, I joined Unilever on what they call their management trainee program, which is a fancy way of them convincing you that the reason why we took lower salaries was because we were handpicked to be the future CEOs. For the next 3 years, in my finance role, amongst other things, I was taught to maximize profitability, which is great. Maximize profitability, Barati. Yes, of course, let's improve quality, because I was working on ice cream at the time, but don't forget, maximize profitability. The price of cocoa has gone up. Oh my goodness, how do we innovate a way to pass that on to the consumer? All good and well, it's business, but there was no greater responsibility at the time. Then I moved to the Australia and New Zealand business. And there, once again, similar themes, even though now I was working for the deodorants as well as skincare categories. Profit maximization, Barati. Outprice the competitor, regardless of the fact that at that time we had greater than 60% gross margins. And we were crushing market share. At that time, the new CEO had come in, and we'd heard murmurings that he'd had this sustainability view, but to be quite frank, nothing changed at that point. Just under a year later, I then moved back to sunny South Africa. Okay, I was in sunny Australia, so it's not so bad. And now, there was a bit of a change. The murmurings of the new CEO had now started to filter down into the operating companies. And for the first time ever, I actually had sustainability as one of my performance targets. Now I was part of the margarine and beverages category. And for those of you who don't know, margarine is the supposed healthier version of butter. And so now sustainability, because it was one of my performance targets, it was now no longer just about my heart, because I'd always felt a sense of responsibility to the greater consumer and the community in which we were operating. It was now going to touch my pocket, my bonus, and so a lot of us started to really pay attention. The target I had was for oil, because sunflower and palm oils actually at the time contributed about 90% of the raw material inputs to produce margarine. I worked together with the procurement team on sustainably sourcing sunflower oil from local farmers in South Africa. In doing this, the impact that we had is we enabled them to increase their capacity because of the contract and the supply agreement they had with Unilever. We also managed to have we also managed to improve their, upskill and make sure that the jobs created were more quality jobs, because we made sure that they had a specific sustainability endorsement stamp on them. I won't mention the sustainability company, because I think this morning I've given enough unpaid endorsements. But essentially, what I'm trying to say is it made business sense, because now we were sourcing locally, so we no longer had to get excess capacity from overseas, and so from a forex hedging perspective, it made a lot of sense. Also, because of the predictability, because we could work much better with the local suppliers, we didn't have long lead times, and the factory could plan better, and that trickled down to the bottom line. So it made business sense. It was actually more profitable. A couple of years later, about 3.5 years later, moving into Kenya, now sustainability was no longer my side job. It was now part of the core targets, and it went across the entire business. So what happened now is that sustainability was integrated into our targets. So for example, I was part of the team leading the factory in Ethiopia, which is the first time that Unilever went into Ethiopia. And the investment, in terms of coming up with the investment case, it actually made business sense to make it a green building. So the excess water from production would then be used to flush the toilets. Excess water from production would be filtered and used to water the garden, et cetera, et cetera. And once again, we partnered with local suppliers, so it made business sense. Working in Kenya, once again, I was drawn to oils, working with the local banks and our suppliers to ensure that they had access to capital that they previously didn't have and were able to increase their capacity, growing their businesses and also empowering the local small-scale farmers. So once again, it actually made business sense. We made more money. And the relationships we had with our key suppliers enabled us to have a special relationship that our competitors couldn't match. And so what is the point of everything that I've taken you through? It's not to flex my geographical muscles, to be quite honest, but it's more to just show you that the economics of mutuality are actually possible. There are three main things that I was hoping that you would take out of this. And if you remember nothing else, please remember these three. First of all, it makes business sense. Bottom line, profitability, it makes sense. Having a greater sense of purpose, and it's actually mutually beneficial, both for the community as well as for the business. You're future-proofing the business. Number two, it's all good and well to be a champion by yourself, just like when Mr. Pullman first came into the business. But it's only once it became a movement did we see real change within the business. And you need to remember that social and leadership movement is what can really then change the dial in terms of prevailing mindsets. So as you sit here amongst your esteemed MBA colleagues, think about whether you're going to start your own organization or whether you're going into a corporate. How do you leverage and form a movement? Because that's when you'll see real change. And finally, for those of you who, quite frankly, are wondering who the hell I am and why I'm standing here, and you feel that it's not your responsibility and that the next generation will sort it out, really? If not you, who? And if not now, then when the hell when? Thank you.
Good morning. What excites me most about the economics of mutuality is that the idea is so simple. If business is about relationships and measurement, then shifting how we think about each of those shifts the impact our companies have in the world. What's more difficult, though, is translating what we've heard here this morning, what we'll hear across the 2 days, into tangible changes we can make in our everyday working lives. What specifically will you do differently in your next role to your last? This is especially pertinent for those of you who won't be a CEO in your next role. You'll be an analyst, a project leader, a manager within a team and a structure that places different pressures on you. What does it mean to bring responsible business to life in roles like those? I'd like to share with you 3 lessons about responsible business that I learned the hard way in my previous working life, and what I plan to do differently in my next role as a result. My hope is that from these stories, you'll pull something that resonates with your own experience, and you might even try out something going back into the workforce. So, lesson 1, the higher you are, the worse your view. I was 23, working on my first consulting project. It was a big, complex organisational turnaround. The hours in head office were long, the spreadsheets were massive, we were pumping out PowerPoint slides like hot dogs at a football match. It was exhilarating. After the project wrapped, I bragged a little about my involvement around the family dinner table. Like the rest of the world, my family doesn't know what consultants do. So I had to give them a good impression. After dinner, my mum pulled me aside. She said, "Ellie, great to hear that the new role's going well. Just remember though, some people lost their jobs as a result of your turnaround. Never lose sight of that." I was gutted. In large organisations, it can be so easy to focus only on what's in front of you, your immediate team, priorities, objectives. But as we heard from Bruno and Jean-Christophe this morning, the whole ecosystem matters. Your actions have material consequences on others. And the further you are from the endpoints of your organisation's ecosystem, the harder it is to see the true impact you're having. I lost sight of that impact in a large organisation, and going back into a corporate, I'm vulnerable of doing the same thing again. So my commitment for my next role is to structure time into my projects to physically spend at different points in the ecosystem of my client or organisation. And if my role doesn't include that in the job description, I'll argue for it up front. Lesson 2, beware of the single goal. After consulting, I went to run a strategy redesign for a women's not-for-profit, a 100-year-old membership organisation that had lost its way. I took one look at their existing strategic muddle, and I piped up immediately like a good little consultant. I said, "What's the one thing you care about most? The one metric that matters more than anything else? There's got to be one. The rest is just distracting you from it." Turned out to be a really dangerous place to begin. Businesses seek simplicity and clarity. When you're embroiled in complexity, there's nothing more alluring than a single metric for success to unite around. It's what the civil servants in my MPP program were always telling me they envied about business. The simplicity of having profit maximisation as your single metric for success. But we now know the paradox that presents. Pursuit of profit unbalanced against other metrics is a fool's errand, an unsustainable endeavour that leads you to destroy so many other sources of value along the way. I almost destroyed and drove away the very volunteer members who gave my not-for-profit its soul in my pursuit of a single organisational goal. And it was only by learning from lesson 1 and talking with people from different parts of the organisation's ecosystem that I realised their dual goals, serving clients and members, and that's what gave them their energy. In my next role, I plan to start by asking what mix of goals an organisation has and what balance across those goals they're hoping to achieve. I won't accept a single metric of success, and I'll keep pushing the question at critical decision-making moments. Lesson 3, incentives drive belief. In my 2 years of study at Oxford, one behavioural economics study has stuck with me. It turns out, if you take people with wildly different IQs and you ask them to defend their views on, say, vaccinations and autism, for example, IQ doesn't predict scientific accuracy at all. The only thing those with higher IQs do consistently is come up with more reasons to defend the view they had already. Add skewed incentives into the mix, and you've got a hell of a Molotov cocktail. I saw this firsthand when having coffee with a professional mentor of mine. Whip-smart, prominent leader in his field. When I asked him how he felt about a career championing the fossil fuel industry, he was so persuasive, so articulate, so well-reasoned in his view. And that view happened to align with his pay packet. I could feel myself slipping at times too, just in the last couple of years, with so many rationales floating around the world to justify any position you like. It was tempting to bend or slip slightly on some principles, particularly when everyone else around you was doing the same thing. It was only after diving back into the cold water of grad school that I realised how far I'd moved on issues in just a couple of years. Incentives drive belief, whether we like it or not. So getting your incentives right matters. In my job search, I'm going and having role scoping conversations with employers where I care not just about the role I'll do, but how I'll be measured and whether those metrics align with acting responsibly and sustainably. And I'm not waiting until I'm on the inside of the organisation to find out what those metrics are. How do you want to be incentivised? And who is around you to hold up the mirror to you as you change? Because make no mistake, if left unscrutinised, your incentives will shape how you think and the person you become. Those are just 3 lessons that I learned the hard way and I'm taking into my career and next role. Now I throw the challenge out to you. If economics of mutuality is something you want to see in the world, what concrete steps will you take going out into your next role to bring it about? Thank you.